I turned reading into an addiction, and all it took was 3 simple steps. Building an unbreakable reading habit might not sound easy, but fortunately I've done the hard yards for you, going through loads of different slumps and overcoming them, so that I can teach you how to build a great reading habit, but also, and more importantly, teach you the shit that has actually worked from my successes. Reading for me is about relaxation, learning and reflecting. That's where I get value from reading, and so a few years ago I decided that I would make the most of that. I was going through a tough period, and one of the things that I was struggling with was getting out of bed in the morning. I wouldn't get up for as long as possible, and then I'd just roll out of bed to my desk. I felt grim. I felt rushed, and I didn't feel ready for the day, and it was horrible. So I decided I was going to have to pull myself together, and it all started with my morning. I wanted to feel relaxed in the morning, and I wanted to feel like I had time for myself. So I set up a routine. I knew what I needed to do every morning, step by step. Which brings me to the first thing you need to build an unbreakable reading habit. For any habit, you need to make sure you have a trigger, something to trigger your brain to go and pick up your book. Take something you do every day, like getting out of the shower, having lunch, finishing your work, and agree with yourself you will read a chapter at that same point every day. The action before is your trigger, and you've created your routine. Easy, right? Well, not so much. When I started, I kept just watching stuff on my phone instead of reading. I'd go out into the living room, make my coffee, but where was my book? Nowhere to be seen, so I didn't read. That's step 2. You've just got to make sure that as soon as you finish your trigger activity, your book is obvious. Put it in a place where you know it will be every time. Put it back there when you finish. Make it obvious and make it easy for yourself. And then I realised I was quite enjoying myself doing this every morning, so I did it again and again and again and again. You get the picture. That's step 3. But genuinely, just read Atomic Habits. It'll get you started with your reading, and it will tell you how to build a habit so much better than I can. I've basically just bastardized the whole thing. Sorry. Moving on. So that all actually worked for me. I read more books in a year than I ever have, and I genuinely have automatic behaviours in my morning that I never used to have. But life does get in the way, and the typical advice can only take you so far. It starts with something causing you to stay up late, a night out, working late, a football match. You get tired and you need rest, so you wake up that little bit later. In the morning, you only do some of your routine, but work still starts at the same time, and so your habit gets disrupted. This is the first problem with a typical reading habit. Life is atypical. It's always changing. And there are so many trade-offs in life that mean often your reading habit just isn't top priority. And so you've set up one fixed time every day, but disruptions cause you to stop. There's a linked problem there. Choosing a trigger and a time of day is honestly the best place to start. But to keep a habit going longer, you need to be flexible as well. Relying on morning reading took me really far, but actually when disruptions started to come in, I felt myself slipping. And then, even when you stick to it perfectly, you get the inevitable slumps relating to what, when, and why you're reading. Sometimes you will just fall into reading slumps, but I've got a whole video to get you over those. So, we've got all these problems, even when we've used some of the best advice I've come across for building up a reading habit. Well, that's your prize for sticking around this long. I can teach you to overcome those too. Over the last few months, I'd noticed all these problems happening to me. I was reading, but much less, and I was getting less enjoyment because I felt like I was slumping. So I changed my approach, and it worked. I now have a long commute 2 days a week. On those days, I read my book on the train with my coffee. On other weekdays, I read a chapter before bed. On the weekends, I still get up and read with my coffee. This feels like flexibility, and it's grabbed back that relaxation I get from reading, but also given me the excitement to know that I'm not limited by one trigger for when I can read. So the advice is to start with one trigger, but eventually set up multiple based on how your life seems to fall around you. And so now the pressure was off, because I knew when I'd read. But still occasionally I might forget my book. I might leave it upstairs and stick a TV show on instead, or God forbid, I'd listen to a podcast on the train. Just lock me up now. And so I've tried to stick to another rule that's also been a godsend. Just take your book with you if you might have a chance to read. If you're going on a train, or you're going up to bed, or going on holiday, take your book, so that it's always there for you if you get some downtime. And then finally, mix up your reading. Read something light, read something short, then read something poetic, then read the autobiography of a sportsman. Whatever it is, just read different things. Variety is, of course, the spice of life. And honestly, it just stopped me getting really bored the whole time. You'd be really surprised how much value you get from just mixing it up. But maybe I'm wrong. This is just what's worked for me. So leave a comment letting me know your thoughts and subscribe if you're new. And honestly, at this point, just read whatever.